Okay, let's switch gears to another 914. Now, this is the one you've been seeing most of the posts on. This is the 75 1.8 liter. Uh, I got a clutch kit for it, so I'll go ahead and do a video on that. And it's pretty straightforward. There's probably others out there, but maybe I'll do something different than the other guys. Who knows? So let's take a look at what comes in the kit. I got this kit from Automobile Atlanta. I think it's like their deluxe kit. It has everything basically but the flywheel. I mean, I think they do offer the flywheel in a super deluxe kit, but this has got everything I need, because if the flywheel's really bad, I'll just have it resurfaced. So you've got your gaskets for your CV joints, CV axles. That would be the throwout bearing. That's rear crankshaft seal, your alignment tool. What else? That's that little spacer that goes under the bolts that hold the flywheel on. I've got a couple of exhaust gaskets. Now, if you remember on this 75, it's got a different manifold heat exchanger. So I don't know. Probably not going to be able to use these, because the one that I have combines the pipes into one at the muffler. Those little doodads there are clutch bearing guides. That's associated with the throwout bearing. That's that felt washer that's always missing. You've got the little, this goes on the pin where the clutch fork sits, little nylon bushing. This should be an input shaft on the transmission seal. And this O-ring I'm not sure about. There's some instructions that come with it, so we'll find out where that joker goes. And then what else? Small parts, needle bearing for the flywheel. Then you've got the clutch disc itself, friction disc, and then the pressure plate. A heavy joker. Okay, and then oddly, they sent one axle joint bolt when you would actually need like 8. So not sure what happened there. If anybody from Auto Atlanta takes a look at this video, you owe me 7 bolts. So that's everything that comes with the kit. Let's get the car up on the lift and start taking it apart. So yeah, here's what I was just talking about, the 3-bolt flange on the heat exchangers, which all the replacement exhaust pipes and mufflers I've seen have all been 4-bolt dual pipe flanges. I don't know what the deal is on that, but that's what I got. I mean, the gaskets that are in there are okay, so I'll probably just reuse them. So what I'm going to do here, guys, is I'm going to leave the engine in. So on the 914, you've got the motor bar that supports the engine from the front. So there's 2 bolts that hold the engine there, and then the 2 transmission mounts hold the engine from the rear up there. So if you put a jack stand under the back of the engine, you can leave the engine in and then put another a transmission jack under the transaxle and drop it off the back of the engine. So I think the first step is get these heat exchangers off, and then I'll take loose on the CV axles. I need to take off the clutch cable, the speedo cable, and then I'll move to the clutch shift rod. Okay, got the muffler and the mounting bracket off. So next I'll take the heat exchangers themselves off. And because this is a late car, you actually have this handy dandy point right here to disconnect, and the whole heat exchanger would come out. Now if you had all your HVAC ducting and that valve and all that would have to come loose as well on a car with the original equipment, but this does not have that. So it's going to be super easy to get the heat exchangers out, and I've done it probably at least 6 times on this car. Okay, heat exchangers are off, and I've got the CV axles off, so no problems there, except this is a common issue with these old CV axle bolts. They're 6mm hex, and this is the one they sent from Auto Atlanta. It's a triple square, and these are on their last legs. I had to drive a 1/4 inch hex in there to get them loose, so I'm going to definitely replace those, because next time I put them in, I probably won't get them out. I'm going to wrap those axle ends with some wrap so I don't get axle grease all over me. Probably should repack those. I mean, the boots look good, but it would be an easy thing right now to pack them with some fresh grease. So the next thing is, I've already gotten the reverse cable off. I need to take, that'll be a strap on yours. I had to replace mine because I forgot about it. Last time I dropped the engine, it broke in half. But that's your grounding, and I did disconnect the battery before I even got started. Need to disconnect everything on the starter, and also deal with the shift rod. So the shift rod has got this joint up here by the firewall with a little funny set screw that locks it into place on that other half of the shift rod. And then back here under the cover, you have this with another set screw. Note that I've kind of mushroomed the rod a little, beaten on it before, so I had to take a file to it. I'm going to try to get it out with a brass punch so I don't mushroom it again. So ultimately I've got to push it through this forward, and then the whole rod will come out. Yeah, a brass punch did the trick. Now, one thing I noted, that whenever you're trying to drive that shift rod out of this and you're pushing it forward, you got this bushing, which I just replaced that. And that is laying right on it, and you're just hammering away, right? So what I did is I put a pair of vice grips right in here, and that way it lays up against that flange. Then you can beat the hell out of it and not worry about fracturing your bushing you just put in. Another thing I'm seeing here is that I've got a little leak coming out of this shaft. So I'm going to look into that to see how complicated that is to replace that seal. It looks like this whole plate comes off, and maybe that seal is, you extract it from the other side, I bet, of this plate, but it's probably going to require draining the transaxle, which I don't mind doing that. So next step is to take the starter off, and then I'm about ready. Once I get the starter off, I'll be able to put the transmission jack under here, support the transmission, and put just a screw jack under the back end of the motor, and then the transmission will be ready to come off. You also, of course, have to take the clutch cable off. So just loosen up. That comes right out of the clutch fork. Take the pulley out, and then the speedo cable. Now it looks like I've got a leak back here where the speedo drive is, so I can look into that as well. That looks to be a pretty good leak. So in between that and the shift mechanism, it's a couple of things that should be addressed. Another place they'll be prone to leak is there's a seal in here behind that stub axle, flange, whatever you want to call it. I mean, this probably has a little leak. I've seen them where they're just be like dripping. This is not in that state yet. I think I'm not going to worry about pulling all that apart. Not at this time. Okay. So I've got the starter off, and got the transmission jack in here. Got the chains on the transmission. So I should just be able to pull that nut there, here, and one up top, and then the two on the transmission mounts. So five nuts, and this thing should come loose. Note that I did take the shift bracket off just so the transmission would sit flat in the cradle. Just a couple of 13 millimeter nuts on that. So let's get her undone and get her out. Okay, yeah, it took a little bit of wiggling, but we got her out. And note to self, remove both top bolts on the transmission, because you have to do it from the engine compartment because they got nuts on the inside of the engine compartment. So basically I had to climb up a ladder to get into the engine compartment to get this bolt out. But anyway, we got her out. There's definitely a rear main seal leak. And I've seen a lot worse pressure plates, that's for sure. So let's take a look at the bell. Oh yeah. Yeah, it's been leaking a lot of motor oil in the bell housing. See the throwout bearing is pretty much toast. All right. So next step will be to pull the pressure plate and the flywheel and get to that rear main seal, which I may do tomorrow. I don't know. Depends on how motivated I am. All right, guys. Next day, morning, picking this back up. So I did some research online regarding the seals. The shift rod, that whole plate comes off. And basically on the end of the rod is like a sort of a fork that engages the actual shift forks. And it will come out as long as you're in neutral. The whole assembly will come out, and there's two seals associated with that. And then on the speedo assembly, drive mechanism, whatever, you simply loosen up on that 13 millimeter bolt, and that will slide out, and there are two seals associated with that as well. So I ordered those seals from Automobile Atlanta, and also asked them about the CV axle bolts, whether I should have gotten 8 instead of just 1. So what I'm going to do this morning, though, is go ahead and remove the pressure plate, the friction plate, the flywheel, and hopefully get that rear main seal replaced. So I put a flywheel lock on there, and now I'm loosening up the bolts that hold the pressure plate on. They're not super tight, but I did put a little lubricant on them. Yeah, it's fighting me some. Those alignment pins didn't want to break loose. I had to do some prying. If you do pry, be careful of your ring gear. Don't want to snap any teeth off that. All right, so that's the flywheel side of the friction plate. And then the pressure plate side, yeah, that was definitely getting down pretty far. And you can see the discoloration. Of course, both of these be replaced. Let's look at the flywheel. It's got a little bit of a gouge there. But it's not real discolored. Seen a lot worse. Let me fish it on out of there. Take a better look at it. You see why you want to replace that washer under those flywheel bolts, because it's like a crush washer. It definitely compresses where those flywheel bolts go in. And yeah, I think it needs a rear main seal. Don't think it should have oil leaking out of the flywheel. All right, so actually, if you look up in there, the flywheel itself makes that seal, because you're looking at the back side of the crank there, and you can see where that rear main seal actually goes around a bevel on the flywheel. So I'm going to clean this up a bit, and a little piece part there, replace that seal. Okay, so I just checked about doing the in-play on the crank, and it can be done without a dial indicator. So what that's all about is these shims. This engine has 2 shims on it right now. I haven't measured them. So the process is to put the flywheel back on. Don't put in your new seals yet. And then you can measure the in-play by basically trying to move the whole crank back and forth inside of the engine. And there is a specification for the in-play. This is George's instructions. So where is that? Desired play is 0.07 to 0.15 millimeters. So let me put the flywheel back on, torque the bolts down, and we'll see if we can make that happen. Right, I actually do have a dial indicator, and so I've got it clamped off to one of the studs and then set at 20. I think this is actually SAE, so that'd be 0.02 inches, I think. Anyway, I'm going to have to convert it. And what I did do is I went along the edge of the flywheel and pried it back as far as possible. So now I'll take a soft mallet and pound it forward and see what the difference is. Okay, so it definitely moved in. Let's see, 18 1/1000ths. Now I need to convert that to millimeters, and that should be the in-play. Okay, I put in third shim, and I really got no way to measure the shims. There's several different sizes. The third shim came from that other engine from the 74 that I took apart. But I was able to cut the in-play basically in half. So it's down to, let's see, about 6 or 7 thousandths which should fall within the specs. So now I'll pull the flywheel back off and start putting in the seals. So what I thought were gouges just turned out to be deposits from the friction plate. So I used a little 400 grit and some brake cleaner and got this pretty darn smooth. So I think that'll be fine. I've pulled out the felt washer, which was on top of the needle bearing. So that was present. And then also I got to dig out the seal, inner seal. It's in there. I just was prying on it with... So anyway, then I got to pop out the needle bearing, and then I'll replace all three of those. So I used a 13 millimeter long socket to drive the needle bearing in carefully. Put some grease on that bearing and some assembly lube on the O-ring, inner O-ring. Also, you need to make sure that bearing is offset down in there about 1/8 of an inch to accommodate the felt washer. So that's going to go on top. And now I'll go to the back of the engine and put the rear main seal in. Oh yeah, nice and pretty. Hopefully no leaky. Yeah, looking good. Next thing will be the friction plate and the pressure plate. So stand by. Okay, so there's a pressure plate going in, friction disc. And here's what came out. Now, I noted that there's a bit of a spring difference from what was in there to the new. So I don't know that this is Sachs. However, this pressure plate appears to be Fisher and Sachs. So I don't know. It's old. Time to be replaced. So I'll get clean up the surfaces, friction surfaces, and put this stuff in. Just put in the friction plate with the alignment tool, and then basically bolt the pressure plate on top. Okay, let's get tightened down to 18 foot-pounds. Pull your alignment tool, and you're ready to put the transmission on whenever you have the transmission ready. So the next thing we're going to do is start prepping that, because there are some parts we want to replace on the transaxle. So the shift fork, the throwout bearing, all that's captured with this 5 millimeter hex screw, because you see the shift fork pretty much floating there. So let me put some lubricant on that, free that up, take that apart. So when you take that screw out, this is going to fall down. So behind the shift fork and the throwout bearing should be a ball. Yep, there it is. So this ends up behind the ball, like that. Which, if I remember right, is a little tricky to get that back in there. Also, there's a bushing in there that needs to be replaced. The plastic bushing. That will definitely affect your throw on your shift fork. And there's another trick here to get more throw, is to put a washer under this ball, because this ball is threaded. So if you bring the ball further into the bell housing, it will give you greater throw. I'm not going to do that because with the new bushing in there, I should get plenty of throw. Now behind this guide tube that the throwout bearings goes back and forth on is the seal for this shaft going into the transaxle. So I'm going to remove that guide tube and extract that. Yeah, that seal was leaking. So yeah, good thing I got a replacement. All right, well, digging that old seal out was not a lot of fun. It's got a metal core, and you can kind of get a bite on that with a hooked pick, and it needs to be something pretty substantial. You can pry it out. Also use my heat gun on it, trying to get it to release. But yeah, and then to put the new one in, basically I just took the guide tube and pressed it in using the nuts, and then to get it to recess, I just turned the guide tube around and gently tapped it in further. So it's in there. I'm going to clean up the guide tube, replace the bushing down in the shift fork, put the new throwout bearing in, and should have this part done. So to get that bushing out, you basically just got to dig it out with a small screwdriver. Just chisel it out because it's harder than nails. Note that here's the replacement bearing, and there's these guides that go on the end of these studs. They were completely missing on the old bearing. In fact, I think that's what was behind the flywheel up in the up by the rear main seal. It was a piece of one of those. Okay, so everything's cleaned up. Start putting it back together. Okay, well, this is so much better. I did put a little bit of lithium grease on the guide tube. But I mean, these bushings are critical for that fork to be stable. So that was probably a lot of the problem with the shifting. Well, at least the clutch working properly. Okay, so now I'll just have to wait till I get those seals for the shift rod, internal shift rod, and then back there the speedo. About the only thing left I can do is drain the gear oil, but otherwise this joker's ready to go back in. So I'm going to go ahead and publish this video, and I'll do a little addendum for those seals on the sides. Thanks for watching.